What are the drug makers up to? What's going on with EMD Serono and Organon? What's going to happen with Ferring now? Why are Mihal and Granada picking up so much steam? Why is Bird and B taking over supplements? Why do I say the middle is going to be completely hollowed out in the pharmacy sector? And we got a list of your go-to guys and gals, the consultants, experts, and firms that you call for professional services when you're growing or in a bind. And a special guest joins me to talk about a few of them. Enjoy. If you like the information in this episode, we're compiling so much more data on new technology in IVF, products, services, market analyses, info on mergers and acquisitions, and data on every company in the fertility space. Go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com. If your company isn't an IVF Heroes Universe sponsor, your competitors are so much more visible to your customers because we report on your category and we give that info to your customers. Go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com to learn more about other fertility companies or submit your company today. Don't be left out.
No organization or individual mentioned or participating in this podcast reviewed or had editorial control over its content. Any sponsor-related information, where applicable, was considered by Inside Reproductive Health through its Business Intelligence Hub.
This episode has to do with two serious topics you want to talk to your kids about: drugs and Trump. Trump RX has shaken up the fertility pharma space quite a bit, as you know. The administration did a deal with EMD Serono. Now there's big discounts on Gonal-F and other drugs. They're working on getting a drug called Pergoveris approved through the FDA that will in many ways compete with Menopur. This is interesting for a couple reasons. Dr. Gata had told me that Organon's Follistim had been growing in market share against Gonal-F in the coming years, so this might blunt that. It's probably going to force Organon to match the discounts or get close to it. And now Ferring has a competitor to Menopur. I saw a post from Dr. Amels in February at the time of this recording where he was publicizing cheaper alternatives to Menopur. Ferring hasn't had that kind of competition before, at least not in a long time. So I wonder if that affects their fertility team. Late last year, Ferring had axed 500 employees, but none of them were from the fertility division. So is this going to cause a hit to their golden cash cow? Are you going to see some of your favorite Ferring reps getting axed? Are they going to have a little bit smaller of a presence? Or maybe not. Maybe this and some other things happening cause volumes to grow. Ferring does better than ever and expands. I think there would probably need to be some sort of intermediary event for that to happen, but we'll see. I really have no idea what Organon's doing. Their CEO had to resign at the end of last year. There was an investigation about wholesaler sales practices, but that doesn't seem to have affected their fertility division at all. And they must be cooking up some kind of response. But for the longest time, R&D has just dragged in the fertility space. And I think Granada Bio is making a big dent in that. They started in 2018. That's Evan Sussman, Steve Medeiros. And now they're working on commercializing early stage assets across various drug classes, getting them through regulatory approval, all the research trials, all the partnerships. They recently partnered with Gideon Richter to bring recombinant FSH to the U.S. market. They acquired Oviva Therapeutics that focuses on ovarian aging. And they're also advancing an FSH product. What I'm hoping for is that Granada is not a boutique name in 5 or 6 years, but it's a really big player in this space. Keep your eyes paid attention. And if you're into research, if you're into finding viable ways to work clinical trials into your business model, you might check them out. And this cost debate was happening long before the White House ever put their thumb on the scales. Dr. Brian Kaplan had commented on a post of Inside Reproductive Health some months back, and he said, listen, if drug costs are 30 to 40% of IVF costs, in order to reduce total cost to patients by 50%, wouldn't you have to reduce clinical expenses by 60 or 80%? Dr. Kaplan was observing that issue, that you can't bring down the cost of IVF care without bringing down the cost of meds. And I think Mihal got ahead of that. Some of you hadn't heard of Mihal before last year, but many of you know them now. They're out of Chicago. They're in generics and biosimilars. They've got Ganirelix and Cetrorelix, and they're advancing an FSH biosimilar in their pipeline. And they introduced a multi-dose Ganirelix pen. No idea what Trump RX will mean for Mihal. I hope it doesn't blunt their growth because they could be critical in bringing pharma costs down. It took all this to shake up that sleepy pharmacy category. And I say this with due respect because I have a lot of friends in the pharmacy sector. But I just feel like so many in the pharmacy space have checked out. And I can't say I blame them because either you just have to be the cheapest and you're just doing deals with networks based on price and F patient experience because it is what it is. You're a commodity like a Spirit Airlines. It doesn't matter if there's no value adds because 80% of the flyers are buying on price alone, or you have to be like a Mendel's, ultra customer focused. You have to be so good at patient experience that patients and providers are negotiating for you to their payers and practices and networks because you are an extension of their patient experience. You look at Mendel's Google reviews, it's 4.8 of hundreds of reviews. And they're not the only ones. There's a couple fertility pharmacies with really good reviews, but there are also some with really bad reviews. And now that you have Trump RX, I think those are the only two camps that are going to win. Everybody in the middle, I wonder if we don't see many of them either go out of business or just get bought and consolidate because pharmacies do a lot behind the scenes and you can read your practice's reviews. Oftentimes complaints come from some sort of dropping of the ball between you and the pharmacy. And if pharmacies have to charge extra for these ancillary services, which I suspect that they now will, because the drug manufacturers aren't going to take the haircut just by themselves, then they either have to be so good at customer service like a Mendel's or really cheap and have a 2.8 satisfaction rating or whatever the heck and just deal with it. You know, I don't think it will all go to the latter because of patients and nurses. You can only push nurses so far, man. And I agree with Abby Mercado of Rescripted when she predicts that this is going to take a lot of admin burden and put it on nurses. I think those nurses are going to want to push it right back off, and customer service will remain a viable differentiator for only a couple of pharmacies, only those ones at the tippy top. Supplements, interesting category, maybe a little bit of a sleeper category. I just don't think you can underestimate the trend of consumer behavior in medicine and the type of brand loyalty that you see in other sectors of women's consumer products now coming into women's health. That's here. And supplements are already routine. 70% of patients say they take supplements. If you're a doctor and you say, no, it's not that high, the source in Inside Reproductive Health's State of Fertility Supplements that came out in January says that only 25% of patients disclose their supplement use to their care team. And for a long time, I think Faralogics was the game in town. I'd like to know more about what they're up to, but Burden B is really shoring up a very strong positioning in supplements because they have that it factor, that je ne sais quoi, that really strong women's consumer products, lifestyle brands have. And that's getting them into places like Ulta Beauty. They're in 300 Ulta Beauty locations. And that also makes them a source of new patient generation, right? Because they are bringing fertility into the mainstream. That's what I pay attention to. I just pay attention to what patients are flocking to. They're flocking to Burden B. You care more about the clinical research. I wish I could go more into that and what Burden B is doing with their medical advisors, but I can barely pronounce methylated folate. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave that link in the State of Supplements report that came out in Inside Reproductive Health in January. So you can click on that if you're interested in Burden B's clinical research. What another cameo appearance. I'm getting celebrity bombed here. Sean Vincent from Blue Cardinal Advisors is here. Thanks for joining me, Sean.
Hey, Griffin. Happy to be here.
Help me overview this professional services category of which you're a part of. One category that I didn't think would be that interesting because it's not like it's AI. It's not like it's tech, right? But at the same time, it's like these are some of the most trusted people in the space, people that have worked in this field for decades, and we can't get along without them. So it ended up to me being a lot more interesting than I was kind of thinking. And I think maybe even more relevant because fertility centers are using these professional services, firms, experts, consultants to fill in gaps from the labor shortages that have not gone away. Like I think, in my opinion, 2021 and 2022 were the worst for companies abroad, but I don't think most clinics have seen any kind of relief since then. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. And even through having the ability to partner with you and having the opportunity to interview some of the physicians I've worked closely with you for years, you're seeing the same theme, constant growth, but how do you keep the same care, right? And there's also always been that struggle with making sure you can maintain the nurses and the staff's happiness. So how do you do that? There's all these different companies that are out there. We know that the REI and IVF space is bumping, and there's so many different solutions coming at you and the providers. There has to be a way to kind of look through all of those and figure out what's going to be best for each particular clinic. And I've seen different clinics partner with different professional services, everything for ways of getting patients through the process faster, answering all those questions that they all get inundated with in the beginning. But then also on the back end, which we've talked a lot about, is helping support the physicians and the nurses when it comes to the genetic questions they get as well.
Our readers and listeners gave us the names of some of the firms that they work with, and we'll go through a couple of those. Cedro Strategy was one of them, and I figured out who that is. It's Ryan Salem. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but that is the CEO, or he was the CEO of Blue Ocean Health, I want to say, in the UAE. I think he was involved in IVF Michigan for a long time. So he's done a lot internationally, and they help with operating models and scaling the patient journey. And they've worked with some massive clinic groups, and that's like C-level experience. So I think that some people are looking for staffing, other people are looking for sales support. There's some C-suite level experience there, which I thought was really interesting. And I think people look for expertise from a little firm called Blue Cardinal Advisors. You know anything about that one?
I do. So 20 years of women's health experience, started in OBGYN and then jumped into the REI space, specifically when I helped launch Semaphore out of Mount Sinai back in 2018. This was going to be my third carrier screening company. And from there, I knew as the genetic testing was getting bigger and bigger, if I were going to go to the doctors I've been working with, they were going to have some type of support. So that's where I actually partnered with GeneScreen. And a lot of physicians will say we revolutionized or changed the way that we actually support our physicians and our staff when it comes to the carrier screening process. Once Semaphore went public, my time there was done. I had had a great run in labs, but I wanted to go try something new. So I created my own company called Blue Cardinal Advisors. I took my experience and also the people I know and the thought leaders in the industry, and I wanted to be able to minimize the cost to all these startup companies that are coming into this space, whether they're international companies coming into the US or earlier stage companies that may be not able or not funded to have massive sales teams. So what Blue Cardinal Advisors does is we understand what they're trying to do to help the big clients that are out there. I want to hear their message, see if it's the right message, see if it's going to be something that actually is going to fulfill the right need. And I try to partner with them to help them go to commercialization faster and also save them money along the way.
The value to startups of what you do is immediately obvious to me, but the value that you bring to them is also that providers and a lot of these network execs pick up the phone when you call them, which to me suggests that you're providing some value to them. How are you nurturing those relationships? Why are they so good?
It's a great question. And that's the biggest, call it one of the most stressful parts I have, because let's say I get presented to by a new opportunity every 2 weeks. And a lot of times I have them present to me these new ideas and I'm like, that's amazing. Let's go. That sounds great to me. But what I try to do is go out to certain people that I feel are passionate about that particular topic, or we've had discussions around it in the past. Some may be genetics, some may be staffing, some may be PGT products, whatever it is, right? There's so many that you've reviewed all throughout this time. So what I try to do is find those different providers or even nursing staff or even head nursing staff. I would say, hey, this sounds good to me. Could you take a look at this, or have you heard of it? And does it make sense? Will it help your practice? Will it help your patients? Is there going to be an ROI to you and your practice? Some of them may meet one or two criteria, but then they may fall flat on others, and it doesn't work. So I try to be careful on going to the same people too many times, because I don't want to dilute my credibility by bringing them every one of them. So I'm trying to create new touch points and different things I've learned through the last 3.5 years with Blue Cardinal to say, okay, this sounds good, but it might not work because of this.
People say they got a guy. You're who they're talking about. I look at some staffing needs that are happening across the place. And I see a lot of practices struggling with filling their anesthesia needs. They might have a group, and then that group has some of their anesthesiologists retire, or they just can't meet the needs, or they get way more expensive. And then I also see probably half of the anesthesiologist workforce going to retire in the next 5, 10 years. And so this is going to get worse. And it doesn't seem like we're putting as many people in the pool to replace those folks, at least from what I read in that report. And I see a lot of people using kaleidoscope anesthesia. It's cool from our perspective because we've worked with them, and then we see the groups that they work with, and we get to interview some of the people that they work with, like Lynn Westfall and Dr. Lynn Westfall and Dr. Ben Harris. And then we see them start to work with more practices, and then some months go by, and now those people that may have originally heard about them on Inside Reproductive Health get some experience working with them, and then they get more and more exposure. And you've had kind of a similar working relationship with Gene Screen, I think, that and I covered them in the genetics episode, and we don't have them listed in the professional services category, but they kind of are, right?
So Gene Screen's interesting. Like I said, it started when Semaphore partnered with Gene Screen back in 2018. And the way that Gene Screen has adapted to the changes in genetic testing has been pretty interesting. When Gene Screen first partnered, it was going to be a comprehensive consult. And just to be clear what a comprehensive consult is, and we've had some great interviews on your podcast about what these are with so many brilliant doctors. Comprehensive is where they do a 45-minute consult with a patient and a partner. They do family history. They talk about everything. And you also are going to make sure that you get a comprehensive couples report. What we've learned is some practices like US Fertility, EVRMA, and some NCCRM, we now have been starting a trend called stratification of risk. And we have those patients come into Gene Screen after you have the patient and the partner. We have a way to look at those risks based on the criteria that practice prefers. And then we can put them in a low risk model or a high risk model. Low risk model is still going to get a 20-minute conversation. We can answer all those questions at Gene Screen so that they understand what the test was, what the results mean, what is a carrier screening, and they still get a report. Comprehensive, it's around a lot of times like 12% of the time, it's allotted a 45-minute consult. So we can get patients through faster at Gene Screen, but we're still seeing every patient to make sure that we're providing support for the providers as well as the staff. But just to go back, just to touch on one other thing, I smile when you describe that other commercial growth that you were describing, because that's what happened with Gene Screen. It was, let's start with, we were in RMA New Jersey's boardroom pitching some of the physicians there. And it was, if they approved what we were considering doing, we knew we could take this and take it across the country. So after we had RMA New Jersey, which wasn't even EV back then we went to US Fertility. And then we went to Kindbody. And then there was more and more. And the street cred continued to grow out there with all the different groups that we were working with, and we were getting word of mouth out there. So really, there wasn't a lot of banging on doors. It was a lot of word of mouth. So if you look at the trajectory of Gene Screen starting in 2018, it was quadrupled in business, and then doubled the year after.
And then you're throwing gasoline on the fire in a positive way, and then it becomes the rule rather than the exception. And then it's like, well, who isn't using Gene Screen?
Yeah. So then you sprinkle on a lot of the donor business that Gene Screen does. There's some hereditary cancer stuff that's kind of tied in there now because of the access for patients having PGT. Also, we're doing PGT consults because sometimes some of the things that they're going to be reviewing, they want to have it reviewed by a third-party genetic counseling company as well. So it's been a good growth strategy. And Jill, the founder, is always very patient-centric and would rather make sure that it's done right, supporting the physicians and the patients first. So I feel like our trajectory has been smooth. And like there's, even with our big growth, we've always went patient and physician first.
One of the areas that I know that I want some more ops expertise to direct people to. So if people are working on sales stuff, especially on the B2B side sales, I'm sending them your way. If it's marketing, I can send them to some people if it's some things that they need with patient concierge. And one of the areas that I have kind of struggled with is like who's like the ops expert that I should send people to. And I want to check out the fertility consultancy more. To be honest with you, I don't know a lot about them. The reason why I know a little bit about them is that they participate in our IVF Heroes universe. And so I've got to read a little bit about them, but they provide services to help streamline clinics, to help with outcomes, benchmarking, SOPs, management, decision making, optimizing results and patient satisfaction, delivering some systems to both get that feedback and implement it at working on clinic reputation and expanding clinic capacity. So that's a group that I want to learn more about. Their fertility consultancy, fertilityconsultancy.com is where people would find them.
Being in this field for so long, some of the greatest partnerships I've had with laboratories, Blue Cardinal Advisors, Gene Screen, whatever it is, when you can find a tenured nurse who's been there since for years and have gone from seeing patients, supporting her providers, and then gets opportunities to do operational strategic roles. Immediately, the one person I think of is Jessica Medovich. You've seen her become so successful because she's lived it. She's done the day to day. She's kept up with a group that's grown so much. And when you even watch their growth strategies, even through a partnership with KKR, she's been able to maintain and keep patient care a priority. And that also came through when we did our interview with Maria and Tom Molinaro as well. So I love those consulting concepts, and they're desperately needed out there because these groups are growing so fast. And even the people that can run point on those, you just listed, call it 8 different initiatives that are like critical when it comes to having a successful practice and having that culture within that goes out to the community as well. So I think that's going to be a big emerging market that you just touched on. And I also think you're going to see other, even nurses, if you will, that have been in this industry for a long time. Because I've even been approached by some and saying, hey, is this something do you think I could do in the future where I could help other practices out there?
I'll add to that. I think another expert comes from that RMA tree in terms of building new practices. I'd put Lindsay McBain on that list for sure. And I don't want to give too much blows too much shine for RMA, but I think that someone that also came from that tree or just did work with them in the earlier days was Dwight Ryan. Maybe I've got that wrong. I know he did a lot of work with RMA of New York, but MedTech is one of those groups that I put on the list of that's one of the people and firms that clinics go to when they're building a lab for the first time, and they have been for a really long time. It's like the blue chip for lab building, and maybe that space gets a little bit more competition. Maybe there's more people trying to do that coming in. I think that they'll have big shoes to try to replicate because I think people really trust Dwight. Rita Gruber worked for them for a long time and she was awesome, and people just trust them implicitly. When you're building a lab, that's really what you need. Like, you need to know that these are people that have done this so many times before. They've run into all the mistakes, and we're not taking guesses with people that this is only their 4th or 5th time doing this. They've done it several times a year for the last many years. And I think that they're among the people that trust the most.
I couldn't agree more, Griffin. He's on my speed dial list. If anything falls under the lab utilization or anything like in his sweet spot, I certainly always reach out to him. He's so busy with all the different things that he's doing. But if I can, I try to set up a call with him and I certainly try to get his expertise. He's definitely on the list for sure.
What else do you see happening in this category that you think people need to be paying attention to this year?
I just think it's going to be a big shift on still continuing to just focus on the patient care. We're seeing so many changes. We're seeing so many growth strategies that are kind of hopefully perhaps settling down. I just think that it's all going to revolve around helping access to care. How many times did we hear that in 2025? I think there's going to be so many groups that are trying. There's a lot of those out there to help with the access to care. I'm hoping that some of those kind of merge together so that we can kind of unite them.
Are you talking about that like patient journey automation kind of category, like the digital clinic patient concierge?
Yes, absolutely. There's so many of those that are coming to me, and there's also so many products that are like, hey, we can do this at home. We can do this at home, but we can't do this. So I just feel like there's a lot of silos right now. And the advice I give to a lot of the companies that present to me, it's like, could you maybe partner with a platform, or could you also partner with this group? Maybe lower the egos a little bit, bring 3 great products together and have one good product, and then bring that to a bigger group and try to solve a couple solutions with a really good platform.
You think there's too many point solutions?
If I were a provider or a group, I would be, yes. I mean, it's the market we're in. We're in a group that's exploding with all this innovation, like you said, AI, but there's so many other things too. I just think that it's great for all the attention that our group's getting, and it's fun to watch. And it's exciting for me who went our journey. I had 2 great kids from fertility, so it's personal to me to see all the benefits. But I just think there's so many. I don't even know how providers are dealing with it. I'm noticing in some groups, and I'm sure you've seen this, they're creating a new role for some of these groups to have a person that manages all these new presentations, concepts, partnerships. And it makes sense because there's so many of them. How do you go through all of them and identify which ones you're going to partner with? We've seen that with US Fertility, EVRMA, First Fertility. I mean, and others,
Do our best job to make it as easy for those folks as possible as we start to build out data.insidereproductivehealth.com, as we start to categorize this, building it into a relational database. We're not doing it overnight. We're doing it at a pace that makes sense for a company our size, but these are the types of things that we're trying to map out, and we appreciate you coming on to give us a little color commentary over it. Thanks, Sean.
It's a pleasure being on. I appreciate all you're doing.
Here's a group that maybe you don't know about that you should. Nationwide IVF Service. Have you ever heard of them? They do preventative maintenance. They do repair and service of IVF lab equipment. They relocate equipment, disassemble it, package it, relocate it, unpack it, reassemble it, install it, all according to the equipment certification. Who would have thought that that's a business? And yet if you work in our field, you're thinking, yeah, of course. Because who would you want to do that other than people that do that for a living? That is ultra subspecialized. I got to meet these guys. Who's their president? Looks like Matt Haley. I got to meet Matt. That is a cool idea for a business. I bet a lot of you can take advantage of that. It's called Nationwide IVF Service. But they have this lab called the Gene Purdy Calibration Lab. You know who Gene Purdy is. It's a controlled environment, and that's where they calibrate all the equipment that they use. So they make sure they can trace all their measurements back to national and international standards, like those used by National Institute of Standards and Technology. I bet a lot of you didn't know that. I bet a lot of you are going to be calling them. Some of you have also told me about Eversana. They have a donor eligibility system. It's an automated web-based platform. It assists in donor eligibility determination. So if you're an egg bank, a sperm bank, a third-party agency, according to the source that's referenced in the State of Professional Services report, they've had 120 plus successful FDA inspections. They've been doing this for 15 years, and they say it saves 60% in cost and 40% in time. So if you're trying to grow your third-party program, you probably want to read about Eversana's donor eligibility system. These professional service experts should be in your Rolodex. But luckily, you can just go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com, go to the professional services category. They're all right there for you. Go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com. That's where we're compiling so much data on new technology in IVF, products and services, market analyses, info and mergers and acquisitions. Every data point that we can on the field writ large and the companies in the fertility field, we're compiling there. Go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com.
data.com as we build that over time. And if your company isn't an IVF Heroes Universe sponsorship, your competitors are getting more visibility because we report on your category and we give that to your customers. We do that multiple times per year, and we do it around big events like ASRM and ESHRE. Go to data.insidereproductivehealth.com and submit your company today. Don't be left out.
No organization or individual mentioned or participating in this podcast reviewed or had editorial control over its content. Any sponsor-related information, where applicable, was considered by Inside Reproductive Health through its Business Intelligence Hub. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.